When we get back, we're going to be speaking with former vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party, Spike Cohen. I cannot wait. We're going to bring this. I'm just very excited to hear what he's going to have to say about
giddy
this.
like a schoolgirl.
I love talking to libertarians. They're like the coolest people ever. Anyway, so stick around for that. I'm Torrey Snow with Dan Joseph, WBAL News Radio 1090 and FM 101.5. To me, it's a pretty big deal. It's a pretty big accomplishment.
Yeah.
That's why when I had the opportunity to bring our guest on now, Spike Cohen, I jumped at the opportunity. Spike Cohen, he was the VP candidate for the 2020 ticket for the Libertarian Party. And Mr. Cohen, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to join our program. And I got to say, we were just having a conversation about the push from the administration and the government to potentially look at accounts with a balance of more than $600 in order to be reported to the federal government. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate being on for this radio station, which is in my actual hometown. I was actually born in Baltimore back in '82.
I'm sorry. Wait, what?
Yeah.
No, great. Go ahead. Sorry.
We all have our flaws, right? So let's talk about this. So as of right now, banks are only required to report to the IRS your starting balance and your ending balance for the year, and any transactions over $10,000, which of course has led to a lot of transactions of $9,999 in order to not have to report directly to the IRS. And so what they're doing in order to have quote unquote more transparency is lowering that number to $600 and saying that banks are basically going to have to act as tax collectors for everything over $600 and report directly to the IRS. Now,
that's a transaction, right? That's not even a deposit. That's a transaction. So if you pay a $600 mortgage, which in what planet is that possible, instantly you're on a federal radar.
Everything that is over $600 is immediately going to be reported directly to the IRS. Now, putting aside the fact that this is going to lead to a lot of stuff being several payments of $599.99, the reality is that this is just another example of government further and further infringing with no real benefit to us or even really to them. The fact is, the sheer amount of data they are going to be given on a second-by-second basis is going to be impossible for even them to process. There's no way that even 10 million people could process every single transaction in this country of over $600. There's no way that it could happen. It's similar to, the NSA spying on every single electronic communication that's made by every single person in the United States. There's no way for them to actually accurately process all of that information. It's obvious what they're using it for. It's so that they can more accurately, specifically discriminate and target people that they already wanted to discriminate against and target.
Mr. Cohen, Dan Joseph here. Before you came on, Torrey and I were kind of discussing that we both have significant libertarian leanings. At least we think we do. But my question to you is, I kind of want to get back to basics. You were the vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party. Can you give me a breakdown? What does the Libertarian Party believe? What if you had to sum it up in a paragraph? Could you tell me what the Libertarian Party today stands for?
The Libertarian Party believes that people do best when we are most free. And conversely, we see the problems that we're facing in this country as individuals, as communities, and as a nation. And we see that the problem is very clear. There's too much power in the hands of too few people. That's the nutshell of libertarianism. And we could talk for several hours about the non-aggression principle and many other things that make up the ideas of libertarianism. But it basically sums up, it comes to one thing. You are more likely to know what you need than someone who doesn't know you. And therefore, not only is it wrong for that person to take from you or to tell you what to do from a moral or ethical standpoint, it's also not going to work. I can't possibly, even if I'm the most angelic and smart person you'll ever meet, I can't possibly know what every single one of the 330 million people in this country as individuals need. And of course, that amount of power doesn't attract angelic or smart people. It attracts dumb sociopaths who use that power to enrich themselves and the cronies who put them in office. So libertarians believe that all of that power and that decision-making ability and freedom and money that's being taken from the people to enrich a small handful of incredibly powerful and incredibly cynical people needs to be dismantled. That power needs to be put back in the hands of the people where it always belongs.
I think my new favorite combination is dumb sociopath politician. That's amazing. I love it. We're speaking with Spike Cohen, who was the former vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party in 2020. Let's talk about that freedom, because across the nation there are people that are losing their minds over masking mandates and vaccine mandates. And I mean, from my own perspective, I totally understand why people are extremely frustrated at this. How do you feel that the mood is related to the fact that the government is trying so hard to control COVID by applying direct pressure over the decisions that people make about their own bodies?
I think that it shows that, once again, government always uses a crisis, whether it's one that they created or one that they helped to make worse, by exerting more power and control over us and extracting more and more money from us. The reality is, the problem that we have right now is, first of all, was started by the fact that the U.S. government, through the CDC and FDA, didn't allow COVID testing until late February and early March, during a time when a pandemic was literally running roughshod through this country with no way to even track it, much less be able to control it. They just sat there while American companies were making tens of millions of COVID-19 test kits every day and having to sell them overseas because it was illegal to use them here. It was illegal to distribute them here. That set the stage. That, coupled with many state governments shoving COVID patients into nursing homes and disability homes, where the most vulnerable people, the people most likely to die from it, would end up dying from it, set the stage for us going from wondering whether it was even here to suddenly there's tens of thousands of cases and 10% of them are dying. They leveraged that fear to push for lockdowns and mandates and all of the other regulations they pushed last year, which we now have data to show didn't actually do anything to slow the spread of COVID. And they're not letting the fact that none of that really worked to stop them again. You know, we are 18 months into 15 days to slow the spread. At this point, I think it's safe to say that, you know, government has not helped. Government got in the way of healthcare workers from being able to do their jobs. Government got in the way of protective equipment companies from being able to ramp up their production like they needed to. Government is getting in the way, and they simply need to get out of the way.
Speaking from someone who's more in terms of foreign policy on the conservative side, I know the Libertarian Party is pretty non-interventionist when it comes to foreign policy, and especially when it comes to our involvement in foreign wars. If you had been elected, you and Joe Jorgensen, how would you have handled the situation in Afghanistan differently from what the Biden administration did?
Well, number one, we would have found out what terror groups the CIA and State Department were currently arming, and we would have put an end to that. ISK, the group that did the bombing, that we believe did the bombing in Kabul, as recently as 2017, they were receiving large shipments of weapons and God knows what else from the CIA. So we would put an end to that. The next thing we would do is immediately fast track the removal of American civilians and Afghan allied civilians like translators and their families to get them out of that country. And we would stick to the original deadline that had been set. The Taliban was more than happy to sit back and wait for the U.S. to leave in May. And as soon as the Biden administration decided to move that to September 11th or earlier, that was when the Taliban started getting a little jumpy, because now all of a sudden a deal that had been set between the U.S. government and the Taliban was now being unilaterally changed by the U.S. government. After 20 years of occupation, you can understand why they think maybe the U.S. was reneging on the deal, which is why they moved the way they did. Also, we've recognized that the Afghan National Army was no such thing, that it was a total paper tiger, that many of the members themselves were Taliban, that they were just collecting a paycheck. They weren't going to fire a single bullet in defense. And begin the process of getting people out of there. Then we need to acknowledge why groups like the Taliban and ISK are so popular to begin with, besides the fact that they get money and weapons from the CIA and State Department and Department of Defense. The fact that we are the greatest recruitment mechanism for these groups by invading and destabilizing and bombing and attacking and destroying and killing hundreds of thousands, millions of people over the past several decades, starting with Operation Ajax in Iran back in 1953 and moving forward from there. We are their great devil. And until we recognize that, get out of there and stop trying to police the world and brutally police the world, the reality is this is just going to continue.
Mr. Cohen, thank you so much for all of the information that you've provided. Let me ask you one more question. we've kind of alluded to the fact that, like, whenever I go, I have pretty good relationships with our local libertarians. I describe myself as a, if libertarianism was black coffee, I'm like a latte with skim milk or something like that. What is the Libertarian Party at large doing to bolster their ranks? How are you trying to persuade people like myself and Dan Joseph to maybe come a little closer and get more involved with the Libertarian Party?
Well, I think the number one thing is that we've been doing it the wrong way for quite some time. Because we started as largely a protest movement disguised as a political party, we focused on the biggest protests: president, Senate, Congress, races that at that time we knew we couldn't win, and some of us thought we'd never win, but that was where we'd get the most bang for our buck. Well, we're a political party. We have hundreds of elected officials across the country, and if we're going to be a political party, we need to stick to our actual beliefs on how things grow: decentralized, local, grassroots, voluntary, from the bottom up. And I believe that we need to be focusing, and that process has already started this year, and I've been helping to lead by example across the country. We start by showing people that we care. We start by showing people that we actually have solutions to everyday kitchen table issues in their cities and in their counties and in their state, and moving up from there and getting people elected into office and pushing for legislative goals and building coalitions with people that we agree with on at least one or more issues. We can build up from there and get rid of the concerns that people have for voting for us in the first place. The number one concern: people think we can't win. Let's show them what happens when we do win locally at the local level. When people say your ideas sound like a pipe dream, let's show them what actual libertarian governance looks like. Not in theory, not in Atlas Shrugged, but in actual everyday discourse. Let's show what that actually looks like. People saying all I ever see is you guys, infighting or attacking people for not being libertarian or not. Let's show them what happens when we build coalition. When we do that, we show people that libertarianism works, that our ideas work, that we care and understand the problem better than anyone else, and that when we set people free, we can live better lives than we could have ever imagined.
Very, very persuasive. Mr. Cohen, thank you so much for taking your time out of your schedule to join our program. Thank you for the work that you and your colleagues are doing to educate people on the policies that impact us on an everyday basis. Hope you come back to visit us here in Baltimore again soon, and have a fantastic day, sir.
Thank you, and everyone join me this 9/11 this Saturday at John Marshall Park in Washington, D.C. for an End the Damn Wars rally. We're going to be talking about exactly what we were talking about with foreign policy right there in D.C. Thank you guys again.
Thanks, Mr. Cohen. Take care. And that was Spike Cohen. He's the vice presidential candidate for 2020 for the Libertarian Party. And he once again reminds me why I'm just like looking longingly at maybe one day. Maybe one day.
He's right. I mean, the reason why the Libertarian Party isn't competitive is because people don't think they can win.
Let's talk about that more when we get back. Dan Joseph. Torrey Snow with Dan Joseph, WBAL News Radio 1090 and FM 101.5. Think similarly.
Well,
that's encouraging.
Libertarians are really smart. I mean, they're really
that's why they listen to the Torrey Snow program.
That's why they listen to the Torrey Snow program. And I'm not saying that Democrats and Republicans aren't smart, but you can't rely as much on talking points if you are a libertarian, because you don't constantly have politicians putting them out there into the media.
And they actually think about what you have to say and have nuanced views on issues, which is kind of like their Achilles heel, right? I think that their greatest strength also is it's what gives them such a hard time in American politics, right? Because you do have to be thoughtful, and if you're someone that like thinks about how we solve problems and wants to get to the bottom of some of the issues that we're dealing with, some of the solutions are somewhat complex and require some nuance, and it's much easier to just be like, just elect a Republican, though. They're going to take care of it, or Democrats are going to fix it. It really is much. There's a lot of safety in those extreme polemic views, and the parties know that, and they dump their money accordingly.
And I sort of think that there was a libertarian streak in the Republican Party for a time.
Yeah,
like Larry
Tea
Elder.
Party movement.
Larry Elder was a libertarian when he first started. Now he's a Republican, and he became a Republican when I think it was when Trump came to office. He started being more a party line kind of guy. So it's the parties have changed, and I think they're moving more. The Republican Party is moving more away from libertarianism rather than towards it, and I think the demise of people like Paul Ryan has really shown that.
I think that there's something to be said about that. I was actually a self-identified libertarian. I was registered independent, and I had always thought that maybe I can kind of take my libertarian type ideas without fully committing to the Libertarian Party, but, you know, take those ideas. I think Rand Paul kind of has tried to do that as well, you know, where you try to influence the party from within. But, you know, if you're a naturally pragmatic person, which someone that is libertarian or thinks like a libertarian, you're trying to think about how do you get to the solution. It's really, really difficult to rationalize. It's kind of a self-defeating prophecy that, you know, you could move through the mechanism of the Libertarian Party. I'm curious what our listeners think.